In honor of Bark Week and Myles Garrett, we are going to talk about where Myles ranks as the best Browns player since 1999. And Scott and I were talking before we started here. This was a tough list to come up with. So I figured we'd just go around the horn a little bit, throw out some names, discuss who we need to discuss, and kind of figure out where Myles ranks. So Mary Kay, why don't you get us started here? Give us a name that belongs on this list.
Well, I think that when you're talking about the best players since 1999, I think you have to start with Joe Thomas. I mean, obviously, he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. I think it's 10 Pro Bowls. He made the Pro Bowl pretty much every season. And he just was obviously one of the best Browns players in history. It's unfortunate for him that he wasn't able to make the playoffs. That is so sad when I think about it. That he got to miss out on that kind of fun. But I think, if you were trying to rank the best players since 1999, in my mind, he has to go number one.
Yeah, I really think this is going to be like a two-person race. And some of the other people we mentioned here are good, and they've been good over that stretch. But there's like a mob of people in that group. And then there's Myles and Joe Thomas. And I do think Joe Thomas goes to the top.
So the point of this whole trip down memory lane, playing this nostalgia game with the Browns, was to sort of figure out where Myles Garrett sat as far as post 1999 Browns. I think, is he second? Are we putting him number two right now behind Joe?
That's where I have him. I have him number two behind Joe. And that is because, as we said before, Joe is currently a first ballot Hall of Famer. And we can't say that about Myles right now. Myles has to add a bunch more Pro Bowl seasons to get to that point, maybe a couple more All-Pros to get to that point. I think he has the potential to get there. I think we are all witnessing one of the best defensive players in the NFL, or maybe even in this era. But he has to string together 3 or 4 more good seasons before we can kind of put him up in that category.
Who else belongs on this list?
Well, you have, I guess, and I kind of went through past rosters a little bit, and Joel Bitonio needs to be on this list. I think there's 3 players who I think separate themselves maybe in this next tier after the top 2. It's Bitonio, Joe Hayden, and maybe DeQuell Jackson. Some people might put Josh Cribbs or Phil Dawson on here if they're really into the return game and kickers. I don't know if they really qualify here because of they're so specialized in what they did so well. But I think Bitonio probably leads the list. And again, you're talking about a guy who he's got some decent longevity. I mean, at this point, he's had injuries, but he's been here since 2015. So I think Bitonio is probably next.
So I will go with as my entry. Then I'll go ahead and pick Hayden here. I think he's a guy that obviously played 7 years in Cleveland, at times was considered one of the best cornerbacks in football. Now he's gone on to kind of continue his career in Pittsburgh and has stayed really productive here into his age 31, now age 32 season, a guy that the Browns certainly missed when they let him go. So I'll put Joe Hayden here at this spot. Okay, Mary Kay, give us somebody else.
Again, there's probably about 5 different guys I could pick from right now, but for some reason, Jarvis Landry keeps jumping out at me. So I'm going to go with Jarvis Landry here. Sometimes I watch Jarvis and his hands are so good that I almost think of him in terms of if he continued on this trajectory and plays another 5 or 6 years or so, I actually think he's got to get into the playoffs more and maybe some Super Bowls, but I actually think he has some Hall of Fame potential. And maybe that sounds crazy to say, but when you stack up his numbers and how quickly he was able to get to some of the numbers in his career that he's gotten to, and just the consistent production year after year, the fact that he never misses a game, he's incredibly durable. So, he's just somebody that I think has been part of the turnaround, a big part of the turnaround for the Browns in this new era.
I don't put him this high. I think it has to do with the fact he hasn't been here as long. Mm-hmm. And obviously he's been a great player for the team. And you're right, he's been a huge part of of getting this team pointed in the right direction. I'm not sure that I'm ready to put Landry so high on this list.
Jarvis was certainly a guy that I was thinking about based on this, just the impact he's had since he got here in 2018, sort of the impact he's had on Baker Mayfield too, I think. There are probably some guys, like you said, Scott, that can go ahead of him, but I think he belongs, if we're going to talk about best Browns of the new era, I think Jarvis has certainly played his way into that list, whatever that list looks like. So Scott, who have you got coming up next year?
This is hard. I mentioned DeQuell Jackson earlier and Josh Cribbs, and I think Josh Cribbs was a better returner than DeQuell Jackson was a linebacker. So I would say Cribbs. I know he never crossed over and became what everybody hoped he would be as a receiver, but as a return guy, I mean, he's making the ballot for the Hall of Fame, based on that. So I think he's somebody who needs to be high up on this list. He made the Pro Bowl 3 times with the Browns. I think he was an All-Pro 1 year. But, I mean, we all remember Josh Cribbs returning the football, and he was one of the best in the league ever at it. So I think he deserves to be pretty high here.
You know what? I'll do it. If you guys aren't going to do it, I'll do it. Phil Dawson. I'm going to put him on the list. Yeah, he's a kicker. I get it. Can you really have a kicker among all these receivers and linebackers and whoever else, with cornerbacks, whoever else we put on this list? But yes, I think Phil Dawson belongs on this list as one of the best Browns since 1999. I mean, he kind of was this. It says a lot about this team that your kicker was one of the faces of your franchise, but that it is what it is. And the Browns made a huge mistake when they let him go too soon. And they've certainly regretted it. They really haven't found a reliable kicker since. So Phil Dawson goes on this list.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
He's the second all-time leading scorer. He scored a touchdown too. That counts for something. I mean, how many kickers are out there scoring touchdowns? Yeah, I think he definitely needs to be on this list. The debate is like, how high do you put him? And of course, there's always the debate of kicker versus real football player. But I do think that Phil Dawson is somebody since '99 that clearly is one of the Browns' best players.